Imagine getting the best seat in the stadium, the power to pardon criminals with a single glance, and your own personal bodyguard to shove people out of your way. Sounds like a dream job. There is just one small catch. If you break a single rule, they bury you alive underground and leave you to die in the dark. Welcome to the life of a Vestal virgin. Quite possibly the best and worst job in all of ancient Rome, often at the exact same time. It is the kind of job that would come with an extraordinary benefits package and absolutely no way to ever quit safely. Today you will find out what really happened to a Vestal virgin in ancient Rome. Who they were, why 6 women held more power than most men in the empire, why their virginity was treated as a matter of national security, and why being one of the luckiest women in Rome also meant living every single day one rumor away from a horrible death. Let us start at the beginning, which is already deeply unfair. You did not apply to become a Vestal. You did not volunteer. You were picked, and you were picked as a small child, somewhere between 6 and 10 years old. One day, you are a normal kid playing at home. The next, some men arrive, take you away from your parents forever, and inform you that you now belong to a goddess for the next 30 years. 30 years. And nobody asked your opinion on account of you being roughly 7. The moment you walked through that door, you stopped legally belonging to your family. You were no longer your father's daughter. Your name, your home, your childhood, all gone, replaced by a new identity as a sacred servant of the state. Big commitment for someone who probably still could not tie their own sandals. Let us pause on how they were actually chosen, because the process itself was chilling. When a spot opened up among the 6 Vestals, the high priest of Rome, the Pontifex Maximus, drew up a list of candidate girls from the best families, and the requirements were brutally strict. The girl had to have both parents alive. She could have no physical defect, no speech problem, no issue with her hearing. She had to be, quite literally, perfect, because she would represent the purity of Rome before the gods, and the gods did not accept flaws. Imagine failing a job interview at age 7 for having a slight lisp. The final choice was sometimes made by lottery, drawn by lot. Picture the scene. Entire families waiting to see if their little girl's name came up, knowing that if it did, they would lose her forever. For some families, it was the highest honor imaginable. For others, deep down, it was having a daughter taken away. But nobody could refuse. If the high priest pointed at your child, she went with him that very day. No appeal, no excuse. And in that moment, they cut the girl's long childhood hair and hung it on an ancient sacred tree, symbolically severing her from the life she had known. The child who walked in no longer existed. In her place, a Vestal was born. So what did these women actually do? Their main job sounds almost laughably simple. They kept a fire burning. That is it. There was a sacred flame in the temple of the goddess Vesta, and it was never, ever allowed to go out. But here is the thing. To the Romans, this was not just a fire. This flame represented the very life of Rome itself. As long as it burned, Rome was safe. If it went out, it was a sign of absolute catastrophe, that the gods had abandoned the city and doom was on its way. So, no pressure. The survival of the most powerful civilization on Earth rested on 6 women making sure a campfire did not go out. And if it did go out on your watch because you were tired, or you dozed off, or you simply had a bad night, the Vestal responsible was stripped and whipped by the high priest in the dark. For letting a fire go out. Somewhere, every night shift worker who has ever nodded off just felt a chill. It helps to understand the symbolic weight of that flame, because to us, it is hard to grasp. This was no ordinary fire. It was believed to have been brought to Italy by the hero Aeneas, the mythical ancestor of the Romans, as he fled the burning city of Troy. So that campfire connected the Rome of the emperors directly to its legendary origins, to gods and heroes. Guarding the flame meant guarding the very soul of the city, which, when you put it that way, does make dozing off on the job seem slightly more serious than losing your temp position at a call center. Once a year, the fire was deliberately put out and relit through an ancient ritual using old methods, rubbing wood or focusing the rays of the sun, never with a flame borrowed from somewhere else. Everything had to be pure, everything had to follow the exact rite, and the Vestals stood at the center of every one of those gestures. They were not simply the keepers of a bonfire, they were the keepers of Rome's continuity, holding the invisible thread that, in the Roman mind, tied the city to eternity. No wonder the punishment for failure was so brutal. In their heads, you were not letting a fire go out, you were letting Rome die. And before we go on, because what comes next is genuinely disturbing, if you are enjoying the real Rome, the one they skipped in history class, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, could you have survived 30 years of this? Let us continue. Now the rule that ran their entire lives: virginity. A Vestal had to remain completely, absolutely virgin for the full 30 years of her service, and this was not treated as a private matter or a personal moral choice. The Romans genuinely believed that the purity of the Vestals was magically linked to the safety of Rome itself. As long as they stayed pure, the city was protected. If one of them broke her vow, she was believed to endanger the entire empire, bringing the fury of the gods down on every man, woman, and child in Rome, which is an absolutely insane amount of responsibility to place on the sex life of 6 people who were taken from home as children. The Romans really did think of it as national defense, except instead of an army guarding the border, it was the private lives of 6 women guarding the gods' goodwill. It is possibly the strangest security policy in all of history, and that belief is exactly why the punishment was so monstrous. When a Vestal was accused of losing her virginity, they could not execute her in the normal way, because spilling the blood of a sacred woman was forbidden. So the Romans, being creative, came up with something much worse. They buried her alive. And the procedure was a masterpiece of cold-blooded horror. The condemned Vestal was dressed as if for a funeral. She was bound and gagged, or sealed inside a closed litter so that the crowds could not hear her cries or see her face as she was carried through the streets. The whole city came out to watch this procession in total, terrified silence. She was taken to a place with the cheerful name of the Evil Field, where a small underground chamber had been prepared. Inside, they had thoughtfully left a bed, a lit lamp, and a little bread, water, milk, and oil. And you might wonder, why leave her food and a lamp? Out of mercy? Absolutely not. It was a loophole, a legal excuse. The Romans told themselves that they were not technically killing her because they had left her the means to live. So if she died, well, that was the gods' doing, not theirs. They washed their hands with a lie. The Vestal climbed down a ladder into the chamber, and the moment she was inside, they pulled the ladder up, sealed the entrance with earth until the ground was smooth and flat, as if nothing had ever been there, and walked away, leaving her alone, underground, with a lamp that would burn out in hours and just enough food to make the ending slower. She died alone, in total darkness and silence, of hunger, thirst, and suffocation, sometimes over several days. Take that in for a second. You were chosen at 6. You served faithfully. And over one accusation, true or false, you end up scratching at the walls of a tomb you are still breathing inside. That was the other side of all the glory. And here is the part that should really make your skin crawl. Many of those accusations were false. When things went badly for Rome, when they lost a battle, when a plague hit, when disaster struck, people went looking for someone to blame. And very often the chosen scapegoat was a Vestal. The logic was that if the empire was suffering, some Vestal must have secretly broken her vow and angered the gods. So in moments of crisis, Rome would find a Vestal to accuse, put her on trial, and bury her alive, not because she had done anything, but because a frightened city needed someone to blame for its bad luck. They were, at times, human sacrifices wearing the costume of justice. And here is a real case that pulls all this horror together. During a period of crisis, after Rome suffered a catastrophic military defeat, the city descended into panic. The Romans were convinced the gods were punishing them, and they needed an explanation. Several Vestals were accused of breaking their vows. The scandal was enormous, and the result was exactly what you now expect. They were condemned, and at least one was buried alive following the full ritual, not because there was solid proof, but because a terrified city needed to offer something to its gods. That woman's life was traded for a bit of collective peace of mind. And most chilling of all, during that same period of fear, Rome went as far as burying other people alive too, as a sacrifice to appease the gods. The same civilization that gave us law, engineering, and philosophy, when the panic set in, reached straight back to the darkest and most ancient form of human sacrifice. And the Vestals, those sacred women, sat at the very center of it, always one rumor away from becoming the offering. But here is the twist that makes this whole story so strange. In exchange for that constant threat of a living grave, a Vestal enjoyed power and freedom that no other woman in Rome could even dream of. And honestly, some of it is jaw-dropping. A Vestal was free. In a society where every single woman was under the control of a man, first her father and then her husband, a Vestal belonged to no one. She could own property, she could write her own will, and leave her fortune to whoever she liked. She could manage her own money. She could give testimony in court without swearing an oath because her word was considered so pure it needed no backing. Not even the most powerful men in Rome had that privilege. A 7-year-old was taken from home and, as part of the package, handed more legal independence than nearly every adult in the empire. She traveled through the city with a special bodyguard, and everyone had to step aside as she passed. She had the best seats at the games and the theater, reserved seats ahead of senators. She was trusted with the most important documents in the empire, wills and treaties, because her temple was the safest and most sacred place in Rome. Nobody would dare rob the home of the Vestals, and now the most incredible power of all. If a Vestal happened to cross paths in the street, purely by chance, with a prisoner being led to his execution, that man was automatically pardoned. His life was saved. Just for bumping into her, all she had to do was swear the meeting was accidental, and the condemned man walked free. Think about that. A woman whose mere presence could cancel a death sentence. In a civilization utterly dominated by men, 6 women held power that was very nearly divine. And they got it, let us not forget, as a bonus prize attached to a job that could also end with them buried alive. There is one more power that almost nobody knows about, and it shows just how far their influence reached. The Vestals could intervene in politics at the very highest level. When powerful men were in conflict, when someone fell out of favor, a Vestal could step in, and her word carried enormous weight. In moments of extreme tension, when the life of some important figure hung by a thread, it was sometimes the Vestals who managed to save him or soften his punishment. They kept the wills of emperors in their temple, along with documents that could change the fate of the empire. They had access to secrets nobody else knew. In a civilization run by men, 6 women sat, without any official political office, extremely close to the beating heart of power. It is even said that a young Julius Caesar, when a dictator wanted him dead, owed his survival partly to those who interceded for him, the Vestals among them. Sit with that. The man who would reshape the entire world may have lived because of the word of these women. Women who had themselves been handed no choice about their own lives at all. So what was daily life actually like? The Vestals lived in a large, luxurious house right next to the Forum, in the heart of Rome. They had servants, comfort, and a lifestyle most Romans would kill for. Their days revolved around tending the sacred flame, preparing ritual substances, and performing the most important religious ceremonies in the Roman calendar. Without them, many of the rituals that, in the Roman mind, kept the world in order simply could not happen. And they were expected to do it flawlessly, in the correct order, with the exact words, day after day, for 3 decades. One mistake, remembered by the wrong person, could later become evidence against you. In Rome, even your religious duties were a minefield, but it was a golden cage. They lived under constant watch. Every gesture, every word, every glance was observed. A single rumor, a piece of malicious gossip, a political enemy who wanted to hurt you, and you could find yourself accused of breaking your vow, having done absolutely nothing. You lived surrounded by luxury and honor, yes, but also by constant fear, knowing your entire life depended on your reputation, and reputation is the easiest thing in the world to destroy. Now, the question you are probably asking, what happened after the 30 years? Because the service did have an end, a Vestal spent 10 years learning, 10 years serving, and 10 years teaching the new girls. And when it was over, she was free to leave. She could walk away from the temple, return to a normal life, and even get married. But here is the sad little punchline. Many of them did not leave. Many stayed. Why? Because a woman walking out into the world in her 40s, after a lifetime of service, found a world that was no longer hers. She had entered as a child. She left as a mature woman who had never lived outside, who did not know how to be a wife, whose family had been gone for decades. And on top of that, marrying a former Vestal was considered bad luck. So many of them, having known only that life, chose to stay in the one home they had ever had rather than face a strange world that eyed them with suspicion. The freedom they had waited 30 years for finally arrived, and they no longer knew what to do with it. There is something almost unbearable about that image. She waited her whole life for freedom, and when it finally came, it felt less like a door opening and more like being pushed out of the only room she had ever known. Rome really did have a gift for turning even a happy ending slightly tragic. So let us sum up what really happened to a Vestal virgin in ancient Rome. She was torn from her family as a 6-year-old child with no say in the matter. She was forced to serve 30 years guarding a fire that, in the Roman mind, the survival of the empire depended on. She had to stay a virgin under threat of the cruelest punishment imaginable, being buried alive. She could be falsely accused and executed simply because Rome needed a scapegoat for its misfortunes. And at the same time, she held more freedom, more power, and more honor than any other woman in the empire, to the point of pardoning condemned men with a single glance. It was perhaps the most contradictory position in all of Roman history. These women were at once the freest and the most imprisoned, the most powerful and the most vulnerable, the most worshipped and the most disposable. They lived like goddesses and could die like the worst of criminals, all over a single line they could never, ever cross. Not with a sword, not with fire, but with a shovel and a smooth patch of earth and the collective agreement of an entire city to simply look away. So the next time you think about the power of Rome, its emperors and its armies, spare a thought for the Vestal, a little girl taken from her home, turned into the sacred symbol of an entire empire, who spent her life guarding a flame, knowing that if that fire went out, or if her reputation was stained, a tomb was waiting for her, one she would still be very much alive to feel, being sealed shut above her head.